tell me when you're ready. We can go. I'm calling this meeting to order. It's the advisory committee. We're meeting today, which is November 13th, 2018. And we will go through the budget meetings tonight as per the agenda. Just to make sure everybody knows, we do have a quorum. We have a quorum of 5 we require. We're 6 at the meeting. I have one remote call-in, which is Mina O'Hearn, and she's on the line. Mina, can you say hi?
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Mina.
Okay, we had, it's not, from that point of view, it doesn't diminish. We are recording it for those who present the budgets. The town will see it. The members who are not here will look at it later, so we will get all the attention you should get when you present the budget tonight. We will not vote on the budgets tonight. We are doing the process, I want for both the people who are presenting the budgets, we are looking at the total budgets this year, so we're going to go through the budgets with you, and if it's fine, we'll vote on it later. If there are questions, we'll get back to you. But tonight is the first process. The town is, the Board of Selectmen are still working on their goals, and so we'll put it all together later. And so we're going to start off immediately with the first item, which is the police department, and we'll go through the budget. Everybody has the material. Please, Chief, come forward. Everybody has the material, including the narratives that go with it. And I'm sure everybody had a look at it, but Chief, if you can look at the major items, focus on the more important items, and where you think it's necessary to make comments in your view, and we'll just go through that. Over to you.
It's all important.
Good.
Very basic budget this year. It's just basically a maintenance budget. You'll see some increases. A couple of them, part-time dispatch salaries, that just represents a 3-year average. So to get it a little more where it should be. Same thing with court time. That's when officers go to court to testify in cases. When they're not on duty, they get paid overtime. That's also a 3-year average. That's what the number represents. Increase in that. We have more officers, young, aggressive, a lot of especially DUI arrests that puts them in court a lot. So that represents what that increase is. You'll see some increase in employee training. That represents training 2 new officers that we've added. One's coming up and one that we just hired in the last year. You'll see an increase in the medical supplies. That represents the nasal Narcan for overdoses. Unfortunately, we've seen a big increase in that, and the doses cost money. So we're just covering ourselves with that item. You won't see anything major on here. Like I said, it's just basically a maintenance budget. Any other increase just represents contractual increases. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I will let whoever wants to go. Anybody questions? I'll go last. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Chief. Just a few questions. Does this budget include any increase for the union contract?
It does not.
Say that again.
It does not.
Okay, so could you indicate to us what that would imply?
Was instructed to prepare the budget without an increase. So we're in contract negotiations right now. The contract will expire for both dispatch and the regular officers on July 1st.
Expires July 1st.
2019.
Okay, so the new contract would come into effect as of July 2nd.
July 1st.
July 1st.
Yes.
New contract.
Yep.
I understand you were given the instruction, that's fine. I just want us to have on record what you, do you have an idea how much that could be? If it were to come, how much that could be?
I do not. We had one negotiating session where we exchanged some proposals, and that's it. So I don't have any other direction besides that.
Mark, you want to make comment, please? Or enlighten us?
I saw the headlights coming, so I thought I would just kind of come
No,
over.
no, you,
So the way that this has been handled in the past, and some of you, Mr. Rooney especially, I think is aware of this, is that in the budget, we do not carry any numbers for what the new collective bargaining agreement will be as of July 1st. You know, obviously, you know, I don't want to put numbers in there which may be construed by the negotiating teams as a floor, not a ceiling. So when you look at the warrants for town meeting, there is a separate article which addresses funding for the collective bargaining agreements that are on the table, whatever we have negotiated in time for town meeting. If so approved by town meeting, those numbers will then filter into the chief's budget. And that's how that normally works. So we don't put numbers inside the budget. We don't, you know, can I tell you that I have some accommodations that Brian has within the budget? Yes. You know, but there are no specificities as to what those are yet, but I am carrying, you know, some level of contingency, assuming, you know, certain outcomes. But again, those outcomes are still very much, you know, uncertain, as we're still really in the infancy of putting things together in the agreements.
So where does that money get out? It doesn't come out of the police operating budget, then?
That's
the
correct.
increases.
Right, so you'll
where-
see a separate article for town meeting to
Okay.
fund the collective bargaining agreements out of taxation. Okay,
Okay.
so if we do, you know, the selectmen have given us the guidance, they're looking for a 7% increase, a 6% increase, and a 5% tax increase. That money will be in those numbers, and, you know, we account for that the same as you account for funding for capital articles that fall in separate articles outside of the operating budget. So all that's got to be accounted for inside those, you know, inside those numbers.
Question, Mark, did they ask for 3 budgets? 7%, 6%, and 5%?
Yeah, the selectmen at the last meeting, and unfortunately, I was not there. If specifics, Brian could
No,
speak
no,
to
I
those.
just
Yes, but
no.
they're looking for 3 budgets, a 7, 6, and a 5.
Rooney, can we get to that later, please?
Oh, I just wanted to, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, I would like to
I'll be
contain
here
that
all night.
to the
So-
general budget discussion.
I just wanted to,
Yeah.
that's, okay.
Yeah,
I
that
just
was,
wanted to
that
make
was
sure
the
I-
guidance the board
I heard you
provided, yeah.
correctly, that's all.
Yes, so.
Yes, I think it's important that everybody understands that and where it's going to be. Thank you.
No, I appreciate, like I said, the collective bargaining is a very fluid process, and so obviously, you know, whatever we have ready for town meeting, we will seek funding for. There may be some items that may not be ready for town meeting, and, you know, obviously, we'll bring those forward when negotiations are concluded.
I mean, that is why we see in salaries and wages a 1.6%,
Correct.
and which is not practical.
Which is,
probably.
right, it's not practical now. That happens once every 3 years. You normally do 3-year collective bargaining agreements. So the agreements will be set for 3 years. So, you know, after this year, 2 years of set increases per the agreement. And then in that 3rd year, it will look like this until we negotiate a successor agreement.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And
Thank
this is for police, fire,
Police,
DPW?
fire, DPW, and dispatch.
Okay.
Okay, so we have 4.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a question on my side, you know, everybody always asks, you know, overtime. And overtime versus another person, can you just, we have overtime of $161,000 for the budget. And now you handle that versus a full-time position. If you could just maybe share with us the practicality there.
We did have an extensive presentation on that when we asked for extra people. And the way we built it in is to provide greater safety to the officers and more service to the town. So we're actually looking to raise our minimum staffing. So that doesn't affect what the overtime rate is. We took those extra bodies and we added staffing.
Okay, okay. Can I just ask you also this is just out of interest, the masters that one of the policemen are getting, that we're paying for, is the masters in what?
It has to be in a, I'll have to look at the contract exactly, but it has to be in criminal justice or administration of justice.
Very
It has
good,
to be focused.
very good. Let me see.
I believe possibly business administration. I have to look at the exact wording, but we narrowed the focus to,
On the computer
we
repairs
do.
and maintenance side, just one more question on my side and I'll go back. On the computers, are you still maintaining and working in the existing system?
yeah, that's just, unfortunately, almost a yearly increase in our software. That's what the company bills us.
It's okay. But there are no plans to change what you do there from a computer and software side?
No, it's IMC Systems, that's the leader in the police field. Most
Yeah,
police
stay
departments in
with it.
Massachusetts have that.
Anybody else? Yep. Yep, Frank.
Chief, anything glaring that, you said it was a maintenance budget. Is there anything glaring that is a hole in the budget that you feel like you're missing and you're pretty concerned that you're missing it? Or is this budget get you what you need?
This gets us what I need. This is, the line items have been set since I've been here, and we worked off them. And like I said, a couple of these items, the 3-year averages, like I said, we wanted to get realistic numbers instead of running in the red, in those two areas. So that's what I did. I went back 3 years, took an average, and that's the number that we're getting.
So there's nothing that we really kick down the road?
No, not at all.
Okay. I know we are not addressing the capital budget. Sorry, you go first.
Are there any new service contracts or anything needed for the public safety building that you don't currently have that you will need once that building opens?
I don't believe so. I mean, we have had talks about, we'll have all new equipment, so about getting warranties and extended warranties, and
Okay.
I don't think that fits into the public safety budget, but I think that's a fluid discussion going forward.
Okay. Okay. And just out of curiosity, how much is the stipends for the defibrillator per person?
500?
Okay. Is that that's a training on a defibrillator?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yeah, first responder training, and that's part of it.
okay. And how long does that take, do you know?
The
For the training, yeah.
It's a 4-hour training. We'll do the Narcan, the defib, and then our CPR.
Okay. And is there a license that's included with that?
You
that
have to get your certification,
Okay.
yes. And it has to be done yearly. It's part of the Mass State in-service.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else?
Chief, could you explain again about the, yeah, I thought I pushed it, about the overtime versus hiring someone full-time? Just run through that again. The use of overtime pay rather than adding officers. Just say the same thing again.
We provided more officers per shift.
This is more efficient to do it this way than to hire full-time people.
Well, when you hire full-time people, obviously, you have the,
Other
the
costs.
benefits and
Right,
whatnot
right.
included, versus hiring overtime. But we've basically left the overtime figure the same, and we've raised the manning on the shifts. I wouldn't want to get into what our minimums are, things like that, but,
Through the overtime, by using overtime, you've raised the numbers on the shifts.
no. Through hiring more full-time bodies, we did.
Okay, okay. And the other thing I'm wondering is, you said that the use of Narcan has gone up. Do you have any numbers, real numbers?
I do at the station, but I don't have them on me, but it
Yeah.
ebbs and flows. We had one 4 to 6 week period where we used about 10 of them.
Wow.
It's unfortunate too, it's, the purity of what's out there is so much. It used to be 1 dose. Now they recommend just starting with 2 and going from there. So, we do have times where, you know, unfortunately, we burn through them, so. I just upped it, so, you can't always get the supply,
Yeah.
you know, up front. So I'd rather have enough where I'm comfortable instead of having cruisers not have it.
Yeah,
We're usually the first on scene to administer.
of course, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mina, do you have questions?
Do I have questions?
No.
She's on the phone. Oh, I'm sorry.
She might not hear me.
Forgot about that.
No, I do not. I've actually, I find it interesting. But just a question on the Narcan. What's our source? This is more of I'm curious more than anything else.
We have a doctor that's affiliated with the department, and he writes a prescription. And, yeah, we have to get it through a pharmaceutical company.
Okay. It's retail.
But we don't have any. Okay.
Okay.
No, that was it. Keep going. It's very interesting. Thank you.
I'll go back to the speaker. The microphone here. Chief, we are not addressing the capital budget tonight, but can you maybe tell us what you have in the capital budget for replacement? If you have it offhand, I know you're not prepared for it.
No, I have it right in front of me.
Okay, just comment on it, because I know we don't have it in front of me. We will handle that under the capital budget, but you can just be informative.
Sure, 2 police cruisers, which we need. We keep 5 frontline mock cruisers. I like to keep the ones on the front line at 100,000 or less.
Yep.
We were scheduled for 2 last year. I gave up 1 in light of the new officer hire, so we're a little bit behind. But if we get the 2 for next year, we should be right on schedule.
Thank you.
And then, just looking, there's a camera system that goes in each car. They have about a 5-year lifespan. So I have one of those. We currently have a Maya grant in. We should hear sometime this month if we get that Maya grant. We've been successful with that in the past. That would help. You'll see the TASER plan has gone up. When we got the program rolling, we had 6 of them and we were signing them out every shift. That's impractical. We want to make sure each officer has that unit on him and it's assigned to him. So we did a lease program where we pay every year, and in maintenance and warranties included. So just very important. That's a very important piece on the officer's belt. And I just couldn't go forward anymore with, like I said, either having them not out on a detail or a few out for repair and we're running short. So that's what almost every department does. So fortunately, I was able to work with Mark and Brian and get that accomplished.
Does that cover your needs?
Yes, very much so.
So it's the 2 cruisers, it is the tasers, and the third item was the cameras, yeah, systems.
And there's one more, we'll replace our department sidearms, and that'll be a cost of $7,800, and they have an 8-year replacement schedule.
Good.
So it's the 26 units that we have minus the trade-in on the
So you're
ones that
replacing all the units?
What's that?
You're replacing all of them?
Yes,
And that will be in the capital budget?
yes.
Thank you. So if it's necessary, we won't call you back for that when we go through the capital budget.
Okay.
Question on process, on the capital budget. In the past, we've been successful in approaching 2 of the larger nonprofits in town to contribute to the costs of, in fact, purchasing cruisers for the department as the need came up. Do you know if that process is ongoing? Have people reached out to the nonprofits to see their willingness to continue their spirit of cooperation in donating, for instance, a cruiser for each of the 2 larger nonprofits?
I'm unaware of it, but we provide service to several of them, so
Right.
if that could be worked out, we'd be happy to take it.
Okay.
John, could you maybe follow up with the right resources, whether that's done?
Yeah, I think Mark, that goes within Mark's purview and the selectmen's purview to touch base
Exactly.
with the various nonprofits as to their willingness to perhaps contribute to the capital needs of both the
Yeah.
police and fire department. In the past, they've welcomed us into their offices and had discussions, and
Okay.
their willingness has been pretty much unreserved, so I assume
Thank you,
that
it's a good
the-
comment, thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chief. I think if we don't have any more questions, you are excused. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the fire department.
Good evening.
Good evening and very welcome here. If I do not have it wrong, I guess this will be your last presentation of a budget here.
Yes, it will.
So make it good.
And are those tears?
I don't know if I can make it good or not, but, no, there's no tears. So basically, when you're looking at the budget, it's basically, again, a maintenance budget with the exception of if you look at the salary and wages, there's an increase in there. My original discussions with the town administrator and the finance director were adding a deputy chief position for the fire department, which is something that is needed. Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, just repeat that again clearly. You did request, just say that again?
I requested to add a position of deputy chief within the department. And within our discussions, knowing that it was going to be a difficult budget year, I originally put it into, and knowing that I was retiring in March and a new person coming in, we decided to add it for January. So give somebody a chance to come in, get their feet wet, and they're not hiring a new position. So that it's basically a half-year increase for a new position of deputy chief, which would start in January 1st of 2020.
So there is half a year in the budget.
Half a year of that position in the
It's
budget.
in the budget,
Yes.
not a full year as you requested.
Not a full year, correct. So depending on how things go this year, unfortunately, that may not go through. But at your request of looking at things, kicking the can down the road, this is going to be something that you'll see that will come up again.
Can you give us the figure that would be required in the budget to make up for the other half of the year?
I don't have it. I'm just basing it off of what the police lieutenant salary would be. So I based the figure on that. An additional 54.
Okay,
Yes, additional 54.
54.
Yeah.
I just want us to know it because as we move along and we see things that could be considered, as you say. I mean,
Yep.
it's not in there now. So we call that a gap. So there's a gap of $54,000 from where you were to where you are now.
That's correct.
Please carry on.
So that is really the crux of the increase. There's other small increases in the budget. Some of them are contractual obligations. Others are service agreements for the maintenance equipment. And that was an increase in our computer-aided dispatch software, which we share with the police. They also have a service agreement plan on their end that usually goes up every year. To the question, I know it came across, for the police chief in the new building, there will be one full year for most of the new equipment for warranty and maintenance. So probably next year, you'll see some increases for certain other equipment, and there may be some radio equipment service maintenance agreements that need to be done for the following year's budget, but they're not going to be reflected in the FY '20 budget. So in FY '21, there could be increases in the service agreements and maintenance plans on the operating side of the budget.
But so financially, it will not be in,
It will not be in
It will
next.
not be.
No,
Okay.
we don't need to include that in there at this point. So that'll be taken care of the first year. So there's no other than again, the increases in the budget. Again, as to what Mr. Purple said, we're in negotiations right now with the collective bargaining agreement, so those are not added into this, so there's no reflection in those numbers that show in this budget.
okay. So when we look at the 4.3%, it does not, it again, we look at the bucket that he is putting up as a separate warrant that'll come out of there.
Exactly, yeah.
Chief, thanks. In the past, you've had, been conservative with training allocations in terms of allocating money for training. Are you continuing to be conservative in that regard?
Nope, I think we were able to get that up to a certain level right now, so
Excellent.
we're very good with the backfill and the overtime for the training aspect of it, so that, I think we're up to where we need to be with that.
Yeah.
So that's been going very well.
Mr. Peters, are you going to ask him about his capital needs as
Yeah,
well?
when we finish this
Okay.
part,
Thank
because
you.
it's a separate
Yep,
item.
understood. Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Thanks, Chief. Going back to the service agreements and the warranties, so where will that money come for paying that for FY '20?
So that is in the, let me see what line item that is.
Chief, can you just repeat the question for Mina there, that she knows what the question is? If you just,
The question of the service agreements and maintenance contract
She just
line
asked it.
item? Yep, that is, that would be the computer repair and maintenance, which is 52,540, and that's 11,200 in the operating side of the budget. So that's where you would most likely, in the following year's budget, see any, warranty and maintenance increase out of that line.
if we look down the, anybody else for questions on the operating side? Please go ahead.
I'm going to ask the same question that I asked our police chief. Is there anything missing, any holes, anything that you're nervous about that you don't have in this budget, or is this, do you feel good about this and this gets you where you need to be?
No, other than the deputy chief position, no. Everything else I'm comfortable with. I think we're good to go, and we can get by with, and there's no immediate need at this point for anything else.
I did want to say one other thing. You guys did an amazing job this week on that horrific car crash. Both, great work by both departments.
Thank you.
I'm shocked that the person survived that crash. Good job.
Yeah, that's seems to be the comment from that. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you comment on the capital side at the same time tonight, just off the
Sure.
cuff?
So the capital, I only have two in there. One of them is, it's actually a joint capital request between fire and police. And we're looking to do our radio system upgrade, and that would be the repeater system and any outside infrastructure that would be outside and not associated with the public safety building, which in terms of costs and payment, it was determined by bond counsel, because they're not directly related with the building, that they couldn't be included in the public safety building. So we have a separate warrant article to upgrade our repeater system, which is over 15 years old and is beyond the life expectancy. So we have to really look to get that done in conjunction with moving into the new facility. So I have that one in there. There's a warrant article in there for a new breathing air compressor, which is a compressor to fill the self-contained breathing apparatus bottles that we wear into fires. Again, that was an article that is in conjunction with the new public safety building. The current compressor that we have is at its life's end. Its expectancy is done with, so we're looking to add that in conjunction with moving into the new facility. There's also one in there that we've had discussions with, and it's for what they call two Lucas CPR machines, and they're manual CPR machines to eliminate the need for personnel to do CPR. It saves a lot of time and a lot of manpower when we have somebody who's in cardiac arrest, and these machines are proven and they work really well. and are very efficient. So we have a warrant article in there for that too. But again, depending on how things go with the discussions in regards to capital items and budgets, we may have to make some decisions on those.
But your request is for those.
The request is for those, yep.
What about vehicles?
No vehicles in the capital plan this year.
No machines?
Nope.
You're all set?
Yep.
Anything else?
Just a general question about transitioning from the old building to the new building.
Yep.
Do you have any custom-made trucks for fitting the apparatus into the current building that maybe would not need custom the next time you go to replace that vehicle?
No, there's nothing.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Anybody else?
That's it.
Thank you, Chief. We look
Okay.
forward to seeing the capital budget. Just make sure, what I do want to ask you is if there are things that are not going into the capital budget that you do need.
Yep.
You need to, I would just say, you need to just contact us or
Okay.
me via the email and just say these are, because we need to know it.
Yep.
It's not just what's in the budgets, but we need to know what's not in the budgets that should be in there, because the town needs to know it.
Okay.
And that's maybe a bit of a change because it needs to be transparent.
Yep.
And that, when we will make sure that we follow up on that. But you need to feel free to do it,
Okay.
please.
Great. Thank you.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on with the agenda, and if I'm looking at it, we're doing pretty good tonight. I think that's important. Tom, it is your turn. So we'll do the management information services. And can I ask you that I spoke to you about the issue regarding the email service
Yes.
for all members of committees, and so advisory is one of them.
Correct.
And I did address with Tom the issue that was, that came up as to security and exposure and risk to personal data. And Tom can explain it, and there is a solution, but it's not on a, please, you go ahead and
Yeah.
I will comment.
So the issue at hand is the fact that the Exchange server, by default, being an enterprise system, does have it's really built in for protections for the enterprise. If a device is lost, that, the big one I can understand is the idea of being able to wipe the device remotely. Okay, so by setting up an Exchange account on your phone, you do need to do that. With that said, today I did a little more research, and I was able to enable a different way of setting those email accounts up on personal devices. So I will be creating those instructions and sending them out shortly. I understand the reluctance and the issue with personal devices, so we will certainly address that to make it more usable for.
So since I spoke to you, you found an alternative way.
Correct.
I have to compliment you,
Thank you.
because endpoint control is standard, wiping devices standard. If you're able to do that, that'll be great. At the moment, I just want to say, on your PCs or Macs, it does not apply. It's basically for handheld devices. And so I just want to say to you, because we did not implement it nobody implemented it on their mobile devices.
Correct.
And so we will stay with personal emails, except for mine, that we know, because that goes on record, because mine I only use on my computer. I do not touch it on my phone because of that issue. So I will copy, even if I do something, I copy it back on. But for everybody else, once he comes in with the new process, send the email out to everybody how to do it, then it will be easier, because we are mobile.
Right, exactly. And certainly the benefit of it does increase if you have access on your phone.
Thank you. Go ahead with your budget.
This year's budget, there are a couple different initiatives that I'm looking at, primarily moving a couple of services to the cloud, okay? The first is the email. We are currently running in-house Exchange 2010, which does go end of support in January of 2020, so this coming fiscal year. So looking at the cost benefit of re-implementing an on-site Exchange server or going to a hosted solution, excuse me, year over year, it ends up being actually a cost benefit to go, excuse me, I've been dealing with the cold, to go to the hosted solution. This provides some additional security and reductions in the server infrastructure that we need here. The other service that I'm looking to move to the cloud is the accounting system. And again, that's really out of reducing our footprint that I have to manage updates and disk space and servers on in-house. So that's a little bit of a cost increase on that, but basically what I've been told by the company is that the only difference is that the end of my support is providing the users with internet connection, essentially. So as such, you'll see that on the replacement schedule for servers, and I believe it's under servers, I did reduce servers and storage, sorry. I did reduce that line item for this year so that we have a year to really look at where we're going and what our true need will be. So that's, that number may increase in years forward, but for this year, I felt that it was important to take a pause and like I said, really assess what we need. Okay.
We're staying still with the concepts here, because you're
Yes.
looking at it at the high level right now.
Right.
If we can stay with,
Staying at a high level, I'll wait.
okay. Anybody comments? If not, so I will make a comment. I do have to compliment you to move to cloud. Everybody's doing it. And the services are good, securities are better, and that's my personal opinion, and I can speak with authority if I may so. So I really encourage you to do it. I just have a question on the accounting side. Is it the same software that is just hosted remotely?
Yes, it's the exact same software. The users just log on to someone else's server rather than our own.
Both services?
Correct.
On the email side as well?
Yes, it will also still be Exchange Online. It's just an Exchange server, but it's hosted
All of us do it.
securely.
Or do we? I think it's a step forward. I may say that I would encourage you to look at other services in the town.
And we are.
And in that connection, I may ask you who does that as far as the town clerk is concerned?
As far as for,
Some of the functions of the town clerk.
the town clerk really manages his own systems.
Thank you. You can go, John.
And at the low level, is
Yes.
there anything in this budget that would not be there but for the new public safety building?
No,
Okay,
no.
thank you.
Okay, question following. If we look at where the town is with its systems, I have some people here next to me who are quiet that says we are in a mobile life and we out of paper and, everything else. Is there anything that that you think is required that should be done to automate some process here that you don't have in now? Even if it comes down later, if there's and I know you're working with your committee,
Right.
but is there anything that that should be done sooner than later?
So, as far as what we're doing right now is, we just launched the permitting system in the building department. I'm going to be rolling out fire department very soon, and then, I haven't talked to Mark yet, but the next department up will be, the Board of Selectmen's. So that will be online processing and reduction of some paper. I see the question very often about reduced paper usage and whatnot. And unfortunately, we are still bound by legal statutes.
Yep.
You know, retention laws have not caught up with the digital age, really, unfortunately. Because I think everyone in this building would love it if we could go away from paper and reduce storage needs, but it is what it is.
I do want to, if I may, just, I don't want to show off, but the point being is that we are probably the first group now where we do our minutes together with the attachments are posted with the, if you go to the meetings, the agendas are there together with all the material in original format. So we actually post in Excel. And people can look at it, they can work on it. Because they can't come back and change the town, but people can work on it, they can use it. And we're trying to set a good example. I did make a request that I made to you earlier, if we can improve that. And if it's possible, I think if all the committees could do it, it would be much better, because the Board of Selectmen does theirs by PDF. It's there, that's fine. I will ask Mr. Purple to maybe look at doing it in Excel spreadsheets available as well, so we can manipulate it instead of looking at PDFs that are unrated. You know, I'm just suggesting that if you could be a catalyst in that process. We're trying to set a good example.
And really, examples are the way that it really works. A lot of times change from the technology standpoint is hard to drive from the technology side. It needs to be from users, really, and really good case studies.
Yeah, thank you for your support in that. Any other questions or comments? I think we're done.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next point is probably, Brian, are you on for revolving funds? Nina, you okay there?
I am.
All right, so I've got you right at the speakers list. So I'm sure you cannot hear all the questions, but
That's all right. I can hear everyone else.
all right. Brian, do you want to handle the revolving funds for us? Sure. On the agenda, I thought. What's for you? Am I catching you off guard here?
A little bit, but that's okay.
Well,
I don't have
we
the
just
list,
want,
but I
well,
can
we want-
explain the overall.
Yeah, that's really,
concept.
that's really what we want. Is just to, if we look at the revolving funds in general, because these are actually funds that are available
Yes,
for deployment. I mean, the funds get used.
yes, yes.
And so we had the situation last year where with the budget and in these, these programs could fund certain things. But if we want to have at least when we look at the revenue base, it really is a revenue base at the end of the day.
Sure.
And so instead of having it not seen, when we look at total revenue and what's available to spend, that is a probability of spending the revolving funds.
Right.
So if you can just give us a short run on that and maybe how much you've got there.
Sure. So I can't recall how many we're up to now, 8, 10 revolving funds. They're specifically allowed by law, by state law. Some of you are probably familiar with them. Some are probably like, what's that? It's a little unique thing allowed by the state. Basically, the concept is, well, there's actually a few different laws that pertain to revolving funds. There are very specific ones, and then there are general ones. Some towns have quite a bit, like Northborough has many more than we do. You can fund a part of a department by it. Basically, it's services in and related expenses out. Just basically, that's how they work. So the largest, I believe the largest is the recreation revolving fund. Just so happens we have some recreation folks here tonight, but that's probably the most active and the largest. As you know, they run their field activities and sports and recreational activities, and all the fees for those go into the revolving fund. And they can replenish certain things, whether it's maintenance of certain things or buying supplies. Under limited conditions, you can use salaries out of it. We also have some smaller odd ones. We have like a Board of Health immunization fund and just real odd ones that we have to put on. But, so they do have to go through town meeting, as any other fund or expenditure, or any other allowance has to go through, to set them up. But there's been sort of, they go through a period where they're not looked at very closely, not for any bad purpose, just people sort of forget about them, they look off to the side. And then every few years, everyone kind of sort of says, what are these things? And kind of looks into them and tries to find what they do. But they serve, several departments in town doing certain services. So I don't know how much more specific I can get than that.
Can we,
There's probably, I don't know, several $100,000 that operates through them per year. Definitely, somewhere around there. So there's 9 of them. I was close.
do you have a figure for the dollars?
Yeah, in total, this is the max amount they can spend for the year. It's probably about 650, 700,000, right around there. So that's the max flow that you can have through the funds. May not be that much, but it is about $750,000.
So I think, for the record, the issue regarding auditing and the comments regarding control of these funds, could we get, I just encourage that we get some feedback as to whether that cannot, the finances of that, in other words, receipts and payments, that we can resolve the issue from, as far as audit is concerned, so that that can be handled in this town building instead of outside? In other words, that it can be centralized and be controlled?
Yeah, just a comment. Six out of 9 of these are pretty small. I was just looking, I forgot about a couple of them, CPR classes and hazardous materials. So some of them aren't even used unless there's some special occasion. The community gardens, that's $2,500. So,
I
so
think
there's a couple of smaller ones here. However, these are funds that are audited. Typically, the recreation fund, because of the dollar amount, or the recreation revolving fund, is audited almost on an annual basis. Might even be an annual basis. The auditor usually goes in there and at least checks for the, spots checks for the validity of, expenses coming out of there and everything. So they're not off to the side to the point that they're not checked or verified or audited or anything like that. They are part of our finances under the town. They still fall under the normal state laws of spending and other, state restrictions on that.
I just want to make the comment that we want to, I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody, that these funds, that the income and expenditures of these funds should be under control, central control. And if you couldn't get back to us on that at some point in time.
I think when you renew, when they're initially put through the, the law changed last year, and I think now you have to specify, and I could be wrong, I can get back to you on it, but I think there's a specification, you have to say who the authority is that manages the fund, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Okay.
What is your concern? Maybe I'm just missing.
The concern is reflected in the audit report of the, if we look at the audit report as well, and that is that there's not enough oversight there.
I like this thing.
Okay.
It's nice and bright.
I just want us to get clarity as to whether there is or whether it's not, and whether it's sufficient. And, So if you, we can.
Yeah,
we
we've
could-
actually, I can actually, we did a report on the revolving funds last year, I think, to the selectmen. I can forward that to you, and you could
We'll
distribute
just
it.
distribute it,
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
Yep, I just have to, we have the question about it, and
Sure.
if I'm not mistaken, I'm speaking now because I haven't looked at it lately, but it was reflected in the audit report, the previous audit report, is that correct?
Was it last year?
I can recall that.
It may have been. I think it was in one of them. I can't remember if it was last year or not.
Okay, we'll take it offline. Thank
Okay.
you.
Brian, is there a limit to how much, for example, rec can charge for an activity?
For an activity, no, not that I know of. There's no limit on, from that angle, no.
But there's a maximum that the revolving account for recreation can have, correct?
Yeah, it was based on a formula of your total budget.
Right. And that-
Yes,
Does that fluctuate
it does,
year to year
Yes,
based upon the
yes,
total budget?
yes. It hasn't been a problem for any of them except recreation there was, I think.
But if I
this
recall
one-
correct, recreation's audited on an annual
Oh,
basis.
yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Right?
No,
Yeah.
yes,
all right.
yeah. Yep. But I'll follow up with Adrian on that, or the chairman.
Thank you.
Sure.
Was a general question I had from some of the members, and I wanted to just put it up. Budget process, Mark, if we could just have a general update? It'll save me some time on the chair report, so
Yes,
you can
that's
do it.
fine.
It's just, it's easier if it comes from you.
Yeah, well, Mr. Rooney kind of spoiled the thunder earlier. So, so the Board of Selectmen, so we have all of the budgets have been submitted by the departments. And as we stand with everything submitted as requested, we're looking at approximately a 9.8, Brian? 9.8 roughly % increase? So about a 9.8% increase overall in the budgets. Brian had a brief discussion with the selectmen at their last meeting, and because we needed some guidance, and had some conversations with the chair, and wanted to get a target from the board as to where they'd like to be, with the understanding that about 2.75% of that increase is directly relatable to the public safety debt. And so the selectmen gave the finance team some homework and said they want to come back with three budgets. One at a 7% tax increase, one at a 6% tax increase, and one at a 5% tax increase. And so we began those discussions, finance director and myself, this afternoon. We got through about a dozen of the budgets to start to set the table as to where we feel the 7% level will be. And we are doing this in terms of a chart. So you'll see what things are taken out of the requesteds for the 7%, what additionally needs to be removed for 6, what additionally needs to be removed for 5. As you could probably imagine, when you get down to 5, at that point, we're probably looking at hours and likely positions. I don't know how much more draconian than that. There is always, when you have these discussions around budget time, about positions, whether or not there's a potential morale issue. So anything that is brought forward, any personnel changes will be brought forward probably in a lump sum item, and we're not going to specify positions, we're not going to specify departments, but we will specify a number that we would be looking at in terms of personnel changes to be included in a 5, 6, or a 7% increase.
The 7% would also require personnel changes, Mark?
I don't believe it will, John.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm hoping that when we get down to the 5%.
Right.
Is probably where, because if you're looking at a 5% tax increase, of which almost 3% of that is simply public safety debt.
Right.
It's going to get difficult. Obviously, we've had discussions with all the departments. We've told them this is your initial trip to the woodshed with us. And, you know, in our opinion, you know, we will look to preserve existing before considering new, unless departments are telling us that, you know, really they are valuing something new over something existing. So we try to give the departments a level of creativity in terms of input as to, we're not going in and saying, you need to cut this, this is where we think it needs to be. Departments know their departments better than we do, so, operationally, so they can explain where they feel that they can best absorb these cuts while trying to preserve the services. And so those conversations are ongoing. Hopefully, shortly after Thanksgiving, we will have our ducks in a row, so to speak, as a recommendation for a 7, a 6, and a 5. We'll discuss those with the departments before we bring them back to the Board of Selectmen, hopefully in early December.
But given the professional budget practices you've put in place, the 9.8% is, they've already walked by the woodshed to begin with, correct?
Yeah, I think that, well, you know, in all candor, we try to set up
Right.
at the beginning of the process, tell us some of the things that we're looking for that are new that we haven't seen. And let's just say some departments may have been more forthcoming, whether they had anything or not. So we're seeing some things that we really didn't, you know, expect or anticipate from some departments. But overall, you know, I would rather see the departments put in, here's what we think we need. You know, the question was asked tonight, you know, what is in here that you don't have? What is in here that you don't need? You know, the departments need to tell the story. And as we've told all the departments, in a vacuum, everything makes sense. What youth and family wants to do, what police wants to do, what recreation wants to do, what, you know, anyone else wants to do, makes sense looking at their own piece of the pie. But when we put everything together, we just don't have the ability to do all that. So at some point, someone's got to be, you know, I like to say the bad guy, but really the realist, you know, as to here is what makes a responsible budget.
What's the dollar value, if you know, between the 7%, 6%, 5%?
About $2 million.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we get, Brian will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe to get from where we are to get down to a 5% is about $2 million, correct? Yeah. Yeah, a little over $2 million. So that's where, you know, it can get a little bit draconian. And you've got to balance it too, because the easiest thing to say is, we're not going to do capital. We're going to put off the roads. We're going to put off this replacement equipment. But then we have to put in additional money someplace to accommodate for additional repairs for items that we're going to keep beyond what we would anticipate their useful life. When you look at eliminating certain positions, you have to make accommodations for overtime if it's a public safety type of position. So it's not that you can eliminate a position and gain all of these savings. There are OPEB costs, there are additional unemployment costs that you have to take into account. So there is no magic bullet, so to speak.
So to get to the from 9.8% down to 7%, does that be over $1 million?
I believe, Brian, 1.2?
Yes.
Yeah, 1.2,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah, well, the first, as Brian and I, the first 600,000 is really things that probably would come out.
Yeah.
You know, but after that, it really starts to, you know, it starts to mean things.
Yeah.
You know, and we like to try to find a way for the departments to continue to, you know, not only throw down anchor and hold position, but to try to continue to move forward. So, yeah, we knew going into this, you know, this is no surprise. You know, look at the budget messages we've put out. If this public safety facility passed, we need to try to maintain our positions, and we're not going to see that level of growth that certain people would like and everything. You know, it may take a little bit for some of that message to sink in for you know, for some more than others. So it's not something that was not expected.
Can I just, on the informative point, I could do it under the chair report, but why don't I do it right here? I had a meeting, we are looking this year, it's a little bit different, we're looking at the revenues first, and we did do it, so we know where the revenues are. Then from there, it's really very important that it's public what the real requests are. and it's good, and then we move from there, so that that's known. Then we move from there to these phases where we are looking at now. I do want to tell you, I did speak on my own behalf. I did say, but if anybody watched the previous Board of Selectmen meeting, I did a scratch pad, which I think, I can basically, we looked at it and we discussed it before the time. I do not see less than 6.5 without amputation, not less. So I said at least 6.5, it's just my opinion.
Without amputation?
Yeah, at least.
Then that means personnel.
I could tell you that there's cutting stuff that should be done, whether it's personnel or whether it's capital or whether it's maintenance, whatever it is.
It'll
Bec-
hurt.
It's gonna hurt. And it will be unfair to, and I expressed I did a scratch, Mark concurred with me. We looked at it in principle without looking at all, the fluff, which there's certain things that are just de facto. And I did quite a bit of work on it. We had a meeting, we looked at 6.5, and Mark, you concurred that that's really a bottom. So we are looking at 5. I don't even see the viability in it, but I do want to say, and I did express my opinion, I told the board also that when they asked, I did say that is our opinion. We basically agreed on it, and the Board of Selectmen took those figures basically and said, okay, why not we work on that? The following would be that it is the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen to present to us a balanced budget. And then we can do markup, we'll work from there. So it's their first shot to come up with something they really need to do, together with Mark. It's their responsibility, they are working on it now. And until we can confirm more of the items, we'll get back to it, to look at the total picture. And then it will be transparent to the town as to, I think very important this year, if we can do it, Mark, is that we also say, not just we moved from there to there, but these are the things that we reduced.
Right.
We can be more specific.
Right.
I think it will go a long way.
Well, then it becomes a value discussion.
Yep.
It's, these are the things that we could, that we in the departments feel will fit inside, say, a 6% budget. And these are the items that are left outside of it. And the discussion then becomes, from a community value point of view, are these things important enough, that we want to pay, and we think the taxpayers want to pay to put them back? And there's always going to be that push and pull of, well, yeah, we should take this out and put this back in, and it's going to be an interesting discussion, but I think we're trying to line up the information the
Just
right
on
way.
information. Just on another point of information, I just want to add on to what he said for the total picture, and that is that the next 2 years are not, it's piling up. What I'm saying is this is not the first year we're having this problem. This is going to be this is a 3-year problem that is going to choke us going forward. And Mark, you may want to just make a comment on just that the picture is clear.
Yeah, I think, and I'd ask Brian just to jump in, when I get it wrong. But with the public safety debt, obviously, we're going to feel the impact of that more at the beginning, and then, it becomes a little bit less over time. But those first 3 to 5 years are going to be difficult. And right now, we've bonded permanently $7 million of what I assume is going to be, probably $19 million in debt for the public safety construction, somewhere thereabouts. The second $7 million has been temporarily borrowed, so you're feeling a portion of that in the tax rate, but not the full amount of that. That borrowing would likely happen in May, and then there would be, that's 14 million. There may be another, $4 or $5 million that may be borrowed, when the project is finished, all bills paid, all work done. And, that may be felt in the next fiscal year or two. So the full impact of that debt probably is still 18 months away from feeling that full impact. And again, we have to continue the rest of our operations. We have to continue to provide the services that we do and to the level that the residents expect for what they pay. So that's why, when Brian and I take a look at the dominoes down the row, we look at fiscal '23 as being that first year where, do we get out from under the rock? No, but we get to look around a little bit. and see how things look now. It's, like I said, this is not a surprise. This shouldn't be a surprise. You all shouldn't be staring at me with your mouths hanging open. The department heads shouldn't be either because, you know, if you remember before the public safety passed, departments wanted to add a bunch of positions. Normally it was, okay, we know it's your year, fire. We know it's your year, public works. You add the position. Good for you. My year's coming. Everyone said, no, you've told us public safety passes. We need to do this. So let's do this now. And we probably did a little bit more than we should have. And now, you know, that is our new base. And, you know, we've got to try and see if we can sustain that through for the next 3 budgets. And we need to do it with some prudence, and we need to make sure that we're not using one-time funds to prop up this budget, which is where we were 7 years ago. When I came to Southborough, and through the effort of the finance team, we were able to get a lot of those one-time funds out of the budget and focus that more on one-time expenditures such as capital and things like that. So that's kind of the story.
I think, can you go first? You had a question before you.
Yo, I'm sorry, go right ahead. No, go right ahead.
Go ahead.
So Mark, yeah, so the budgets are not all equal, right? Not everything is a one. Not everything is a top priority. So who prioritizes what is the important things to keep? Like, is it the Board of Selectmen? I mean, how do we should focus, I mean, obviously the top priorities should be funded, whatever they are. So instead of, it doesn't sound like you're trying to like balance and make everybody happy. Everybody's not gonna be happy, but the priorities should be
If everybody's happy,
fully
we're
funded.
doing something wrong.
Right, but
So,
the priorities
yeah,
should be funded as much as possible. And then
right.
the lower priorities,
Right.
it's tough, but, you know,
Well,
it
we
is
have,
what it
like I
is.
said, you know, and I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but you look at what are the responsibilities of government? What are you responsible to provide? You know, public safety, police and fire, you know, public works for your streets, and for those services, schools, you know, town clerk, those administrative services. Beyond that, everything else is a community value. You would say, wait a minute, you know, we don't need library? We don't need youth and family services? I'm not saying that, you know. That's a community discussion, that's a community value as to, you know, we know that we have to pay for these things, but we want to pay more because we value these, you know, these particular items, you know. And I'm not suggesting that those be your priorities, but, you know, when it comes down to those things, these are the things that you have to provide, and the other items are things that you provide because, you know, those are values that the community wants.
So where is that discussion? Is that in the selectmen's meeting? Is that where that happens? I mean, town meeting's really too late for it.
Yeah, the selectmen, you know, and I don't know, remember when I mentioned the morale issue of, you know, that, you know, well, this employee, you know, position may be cut and then it doesn't happen, but you were willing to put me on the chopping block anyway. I don't think the selectmen are gonna sit there, we value police more than library. We value library more than recreation. We value public works more than treasure collector. You know, that's not helpful. I think the selectmen look at it as a package, you know, and John can speak to how he looked at it when he was sitting on the board, but, you know, they look at it as, you know, as a total package, you know, for what is being provided. I don't think that they've never set a value since I've been here. They've never said, you know, we value this, you know, they said we support these things, but they've never put, I think, one above another.
Mr. Peters, you mentioned you did a revenue study or revenue projection. What does the revenue projection look moving forward? I mean, there's nothing big on the horizon, correct, in terms of increasing our revenue?
No,
Just corrected.
Yeah.
It's not I did it, they did it.
Okay, I'm
But-
sorry.
But and I actually distributed it, so we know, so I'm just saying to you, they did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, John, the revenues, in general are pretty flat. So I can give you the 30,000-foot view, but if you
Sure.
want more specifics, I'll turn it over to
That-
Brian.
no.
But, you know, I think the revenues are pretty flat. The state revenues, you know, are not, you know, all that significant.
Right.
You know, if it's a 1%, increase from the state in local aid in those accounts, you know, it means about $43,000 to us. You know, so people get excited with a 1% increase, but that's really what it means, and that doesn't take into account the charges that come back on the back end from the state. our motor vehicle excise, which usually is a fairly healthy source of revenue, and we see upticks and everything, we're finally seeing a flattening of that. And that's not a great sign. You know, people aren't buying new cars as often and that, so we're not seeing that uptick in that revenue. You know, we don't have a whole lot of development, you know, on the deck right now. There's not a whole lot in the pipeline, so therefore you're not going to see a lot of growth in your, you know, in your real estate. You're not going to see your new growth, you know, expanding as you would. You know, the years of the, you know, $700,000-800,000 is now probably more $200,000 and $300,000. Excuse me. So,
Mark, bottom line, there is no increase in the revenue coming forward that is really significant. I mean, it's immaterial.
yeah, I don't.
It's immaterial.
There
You
really,
could
there really is
basically work
nothing
on
at this
zero.
point. There is not a whole lot. We're basically trying to move forward with the revenues that we have and, you know, reallocating, you know, some of those funding sources.
So 5 years out, I know it's difficult to look, but if the revenues are marginally increasing, if at all, expenses certainly will continue to increase.
5 years out, you know, revenues are going to continue to increase. Salaries will continue, expenses will continue to increase, salaries will continue to increase. You know, is the state going to finally begin to look to address with the communities some of these issues with OPEB? You know, in handling pension expenses, handling, you know, benefits for employees that are provided, you know, once they leave service. You know, some of these things are big questions which could change the dynamic of some of these discussions. But again, these are things that have been floated, you know, at the state level, and there's really been no traction on them to this point. So yeah, there's a number of things that could change the conversation very quickly, but I don't see anything changing that conversation, you know, coming up in the next year or two.
The reason I ask is that even as the public safety building burden lessens, there's other issues on that scale that are going to continue to burden the community in terms of expenses.
Yes, I mean, you know, you got to look at the public safety. You know, the public safety facility is going to put a brand-new facility and take two aging, dilapidated facilities, you know, out of the town's inventory that have been costing us money. You know, the Board of Selectmen is in the process, maybe successfully this time, for disposing of Fayville Hall. And, you know, and that is an older building that needs attention, that has a failed septic system, that has issues and everything in that. So we're eliminating a lot of these older pieces of our inventory, which no longer are going to become liabilities for us. You know, there is that positive that we are protecting our infrastructure, you know, so to speak. You know, there is a cost of doing that, but we're reducing our liabilities down the road in that aspect as well.
Judy?
Yes, when you ask the question, who's going to make the decision, actually, a lot of it's going to happen at town meeting. And we saw that almost happen last year with rec. So it's going to take arm twisting from you and arm twisting from us to the department heads to try to control that, but they have boards. And I'm not talking about rec. I mean, I did it for the library when I was chair, who will come forward anyway at town meeting, and we'll discover that town meeting will support the
Happened my
library.
first year.
It was great. It was exciting.
Yeah.
But now we're in a...
Depends which side of the table you were sitting
Well,
on,
at
but
that
yeah.
time, I was down there. I thought it was fabulous. And all the people who'd been there forever were terrified.
Yeah.
But it worked. So this is going to be a very complex year.
You're
I mean,
absolutely-
I admire the Recreation Commission because they really stand for what you're doing what should be done. But it's going to be a really tough year, and for you guys
Yeah.
particularly.
Well, you're absolutely correct. You know, town meeting is the ultimate control of the purse, okay? They'll make the decisions. Now, that being said, I don't think there's anyone that walks into town meeting that basically said, look, here's a pot of $54 million. You guys figure out how to do it. Whatever you want to vote, that's great. I think town meeting would think that's an insult. You know, we need to come in with a plan that we think is responsible, and, you know, and there are discussions. You're absolutely correct. Elected boards and committees and officials can disagree with the process, and can bring forward their number is the number that shows up at town meeting and shows up in the warrant. So, you know, if we can't come to agreement with planning or library or town clerk or some other elected, you know, board or committee, that's the number that comes forward, and we have to incorporate that into the discussion. Yeah, it's, you know, this committee, as well as the Board of Selectmen, you know, need to decide, are you going to be willing to hold departments, and as well as the finance team and everything, are we gonna hold people to the process, and are we gonna have the support of advisory and the Board of Selectmen to hold to the process? Or, you know, are we just gonna play Matador? And we're just gonna kinda let people, if they wanna follow the process, great. If they don't wanna follow the process, we'll let them in and we'll let town meeting decide what's gonna happen.
No.
You know, I think we'll hold the accountability on our side, and I think from the finance team's point of view, we would ask that, you know, advisory and the Board of Selectmen help us respect the process. You know, because there is value in the process, and that's really the only way we're gonna be able to keep, you know, control of, you know, of the finances and try to keep things within, you know, some level of affordability.
I do want to, I use the forum, we do have I mean, we are so close to legal limits. I mean, there are certain things that so if you make a comment, I mean, the budget as it came in is putting us on the water
Sure.
already. So we got to cut budget just to be, just to stay afloat. And then, so if you have items coming ad hoc on a different basis, I mean, the town will know that they can't do it. I mean, basically they can do it, but it's not gonna work. So it's to keep the process through the right cycle, in that it's, because we are so close to running out of oxygen, that it's basically gonna be impossible to do, if we do the budget the way it's gonna come in, that what it looks like right now, is so close to where there's no more air left, that you really can't do it. So it's gonna be I think, it'll be good if anybody is thinking of going the other way, any of the commissions or committees, or they really need to think carefully about it, and I think it should be a very frank discussion in order not to have that situation, because it'll be an embarrassment to everybody if it goes forward, and then it can't be done in any case.
Well, I think that, and that being said, you know, this gloom and doom discussion we're having, you know, I'm not aware of any rogue committees. I'm not aware of any rogue departments.
Yep.
You know, departments are coming in and asking for what they feel they need, the question you asked earlier, and now it's up to, you know, the finance team to bring forward a budget that we feel tries to find some place that we can meet based on what, you know, the departments are asking for and what, you know, we think is affordable. Okay, and you know, and we're trying to find, you know, we're trying to find that place right now, but it's a little bit of a journey, and we've just kind of taken the first few steps in that direction.
So the timeline still is end of November for the Board of Selectmen to take a position?
Yeah, I think we're gonna bring it back the first meeting in December, for them, to at least see the information. I don't know whether the board will, you know, take a position. I'm sure we'll have some indication at that point whether there are certain scenarios that they're not willing to entertain. You know, I do tend to agree with you that, you know, I think, you know, probably not 7, not 6, maybe somewhere in between, maybe where we finally lie, but I think, you know, the exercise has value, and to be able to understand what fits in 7, what doesn't fit in 6, may be why you end up in between the two somewhere. There may be things that the selectmen agree they'd like to have back in.
November, our next meeting will be before then. Trying to think, what is it that we can sensibly cover and get behind warrant articles?
We could take a look at things that may be submitted for warrant articles, but I'm not sure what, I'll have to take a look at the schedule and see when everything is due at that point. There will be, since you did talk about revolving funds, there will be one new revolving fund look to add this year, which will be for the golf course. There is revenue, probably between $20,000 and $25,000 in revenue that's taken in each year from the management company. I think it makes all the sense in the world to put that in a revolving fund so that, you know, as issues come up with the course, that need to be addressed, things that need to be fixed, things like that, it can be used out of the funds generated from the management contract, so that those are things that don't have to be put back on the taxpayer. So that's one revolving fund adjustment that's looking to be made.
Okay, so Mark and I will work on what we can sensibly do at the next meeting, and bring in what we can that we think is gonna not change. So we will work on the next meeting to make sure we can cover as much as we can, although we don't have the Board of Selectmen standing yet.
Could I ask a question? This is going to show my lack of knowledge as to the advisory process, but why are we looking at budgets now, i.e. police, fire, MIS, if there's going to be some iterations to those budgets that ultimately are going to be the ones that get through or the selectmen agree on?
I would gladly answer the question.
Yeah, and I'm not asking that in a pejorative sense. I just don't understand why we're going through this exercise.
You will note that we are not voting on the budgets.
Right.
But it's very important that we cover as much as we can, and that you can make notes tonight. We can make notes of things that we know. And the reason for that is that because the town meeting has been moved forward, if you really look at the schedule, we are now looking at the Board of Selectmen taking a position the first week in December. We got Christmas, we need to wrap up in January the 15th. Middle of January, we need to wrap up. So we're trying to cover only the budgets that we think are not gonna move much.
All right, that's the case.
And so that I can tell you, we're gonna have one hell of a crunch. And we discussed that. And so we're trying to cover as much of what will be de facto. Kind of, it's not really gonna change before the time.
Because I think the answer to your question about whether or not the budget has everything in it that is needed may be a different answer if it has to be cut by $200,000 in order to get to the 6.5%. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, the reason why we covered these ones we did tonight are because there's very little chance that it's gonna change.
Okay.
Very little chance that these ones are gonna change. If you look at the percentages down, it's very low. And I do want to comment on that. So, but we, just to add on, because if you did not notice the Board of Selectmen meeting, we had a discussion, and I expressed my opinion at the Board of Selectmen meeting that we really need to reconsider. It is not practical to have the town meeting when we're having it. It's too soon, for many reasons. And we went through that with the Board of Selectmen, and asked that they come forward to the town meeting, not to change the Saturday, but to move the meeting, the meeting later. The other towns, I can tell you, don't have meetings until May. Most, it's late April, May. What we are doing is we don't have, I mean, you can expand on the stuff that we really don't have, stuff that we can't have. The time cycle is very short. We don't have the finance. I mean, why don't you, it's just easier if you speak to it, Mark.
Yeah, like I said, I personally don't mind Saturdays. I've had Saturdays in the past. I think it's fine. I prefer to start earlier, but that's another matter. In terms of earlier in the day on Saturday. But I think that it is difficult, when you really don't have a good handle on some of your, your local receipts. We're going into the budget season and we don't even have really a quarter, first quarter receipts barely under our belt. We don't have some of our major local receipts that are coming in until just after the first of the year. You don't have the governor, really who sets, House 1 for the state budget until maybe the third week in January. And quite honestly, that's the floor, not the ceiling. He basically says, here's what I'm willing to do, and then the House and the Senate play one-upsmanship all the way through June. Now, I understand we don't meet in June. Right now, last year we met in April, and that's fine. But by then, we've at least got the Senate and the House to probably agree that it will be no less than this. So you've got a good idea probably sometime, beginning of March, just before we finalize everything, about where the legislature is going to be. Again, is it moving mountains with big numbers? No. But it does make it difficult. It makes it difficult for the school. I know the school has, and I would give them all the kudos in the world, have accelerated their process, and they're kind of skipping steps to try to get to a final number very quickly so that we can have that information. Normally, it's the beginning of March that advisory is seeing them, and middle of March. They're at the end of your budget process because that's when their process ends. They've tried to accelerate everything to try and meet everything. It's challenging. And you have to make some conservative estimates when it comes to revenue. You know, we have to assume that we need to be definitive in what we're going to get because we certainly don't want to run a revenue deficit. So we can't make an assumption that maybe this money will come in at the end of the day. Now, does that translate into more free cash at the end of next year? Possibly. But, you know, does it mean that we have to go with a couple of less positions or a couple less programs that maybe we could have afforded and fit into the budget if we had waited a little bit until some of these issues fleshed out, through the normal process in the spring? You know, possibly. I mean, you know, you can pick either side and you wouldn't be wrong on either side of it. But the accelerated process does make it a little bit more difficult for you to, you know, operate with a certain level of accuracy on some of these things.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay?
That's a general update.
That's more than a general update, but yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
The next item, Kathy said she would present her model, so we're keeping it up. She's not here tonight, because if she comes and she presents it, you can't discuss it if it's not on the agenda, so we're keeping it. It's not for discussion tonight. Approval of minutes, I'm gonna postpone to the next meeting. I had both Frank and I had to cop out tonight for stuff that he had. And Ravi had a death in his family 2 days ago, so, you know, he just didn't, the things didn't realize. So I'm gonna move, we will approve the minutes, I'll move that over to the next meeting. And seeing that, I just wanna say thank you very much to Brad for taking minutes here tonight, much appreciated. As far as the chair report is concerned, I did think I did express, while Mark was busy, that I was asked at the Board of Selectmen meeting where we stand, or what our opinion is, and I said I speak in my personal capacity because we haven't discussed it yet, but I did very strongly suggest, there were 2 points we discussed. One was what we think is the minimum we're gonna get away with. And the second point was, there was a question about our credit rating, and I will leave that for there because that becomes a sensitive point. The board asked whether the credit rating would be affected if we do what we do. I spent our credit rating. I did spend personally, the person from the credit rating agency that we actually use, which is the biggest, they do about 80% of the credit ratings here. I spent we personally with him and listened to him for about an hour and a half on how they approach the ratings. And we have all the information. I mean, it's not that we will be affected, but it's also not that we may not be affected. I mean, we can make a long story out of that, which I'm not gonna go into now. But that stays an issue. A probability if we go down this road, what will happen to that. I did express that. That was basically it. Apart from that, I'm staying in touch with where we are going and where the figures are, just to see where it's going. If there's anything, we will have our next meeting. Next week is Thanksgiving. I had to go. Most people negate it, so we are not doing anything next week. But the 27th, we'll pack in what we can. Again, John, and for everybody, we're going to try to run through what we can, because we're going to have Christmas and New Year, and we have to wrap up middle of January. At least we can get a good feel before the time as to where it is right now. Otherwise, it's just gonna be too little time to cover these matters in, you know, if everybody took a note tonight of what was said, we know where it is, we know what's there, and if we want to take a position on it, we can take a position without them coming back. We should be able to do it. Other matters, anybody else?
Can I just make a comment on what we reviewed tonight? And maybe it's more of a question. So back to the union contracts that have not been approved and we don't have a placeholder for them. I think with moving the date up and trying to be transparent to town meeting, I would be in favor of having a placeholder for that. And that was something that, when I met with the chief, we discussed, when specifically talking about the fire budget. So, and I know it applies
Be specific, is the placeholder for?
for the union contract,
Yes.
assuming that there would be some sort of increase. And there's other hourly positions within town that are not part of the union. So I would assume we could use some sort of placeholder that would be comparable to that type of increase. So that was one of my concerns about the departments that we reviewed tonight. And then so that was just a general. The other thing is, I was expecting to see some sort, and you can probably speak to this better than I can, John. I was expecting to see some more increases to the maintenance and service contracts for the public safety building, like cameras that have to be installed in the building, and some things that are new to the building because they're changing buildings and it's a new system. So I don't know if there's a list of items that your committee has that we can review and make sure it's included as part of the operating budget, because I don't believe that a lot of that is included as part of the public building funding.
Can I, so, I mean, the comment that you make is really directed at the Finance Committee. Mark, did you hear the request or the suggestion or the concern?
If she wanted to synthesize it, it may help me think of an answer by the time I get to the mic.
So 2 comments. With the uncertainty of more items because town meeting's gotten moved up, I was concerned with not having a placeholder for the union contracts. So I would like to see a line item in there as a placeholder that would be comparable to what the increases are for non-union personnel, just to have more transparency for town meeting and have less of an increase if a warrant were to be presented.
Can I ask, because you are doing a warrant article for
Yes.
those unforeseens? And if you make it transparent in the warrant article, it will be transparent, right?
Yes, so there is a warrant article that is done for the collective bargaining agreements, and I'd be happy to go over how we've done it in the past with you offline. But it simply states, for example, $48,000, for the fire union, X amount for DPW, X amount for this and that. And we'll do a brief presentation to the extent the town meeting wants it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, which basically says, here's the bullet points for the collective bargaining agreement. It means this amount of COLA, it means this, it means this, it means this. So all that is explained. It is, I guess to some extent, you gotta trust me, that we have made, accommodations inside this 9.8 that we're looking at, as requested for, what we commonly need, for negotiations. But I don't want to put something out on the table that basically, so the union says, great, that's what we've got, that's our starting point. Now we know that we can at least get that and go beyond.
So in your 5, 6, and 7%
Yes.
models that you're doing, will it include
It all has to carry,
something
it all,
in-
yes.
So that's not something that's gonna get cut, and then we actually do need
No,
it in the warrant?
no, because that's something we have to accommodate for.
Okay.
Where it gets, and not to complicate this,
Okay.
but where it gets interesting, for example, we didn't settle fire, the last time around. We
Okay.
went to JLMC, which is a state process for mediation and arbitration. And then, when we did settle it and go to town meeting to fund it, we needed to fund not only from that point forward, but all the way back the previous year. So essentially, you were being asked to pay for 2 years' worth of increases in one shot. So, police and fire can extend out, and you do have that look back from
Okay.
police and fire.
So are you satisfied on that point?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
So,
Then there was the next.
but I'm
I think I
I'm
wanna
happy to
see-
talk about it offline
Was it
with you.
in town
Be
meeting
practical.
2016 was the last warrant it would have been included in?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
All right,
Yep.
if you can send me the page number, because I looked at it today and I couldn't find it.
okay. Brian? Yeah.
And then I'll let you know if I have
Yeah,
any questions.
that's
and-
fine. Yeah, no, happy to, like I said, just to
Alright.
show you how it looks.
Okay,
And then if town meeting approves that article, then as of July 1st, when the accountant sets all the budgets up for the new fiscal year, that money is all put in to the line items to address the COLAs and any other ancillary pieces that were
Chelsea,
agreed to in the contract.
you feel free to, when you can't find something,
yeah,
you don't have to wait until you just pick up the phone, call
Alright.
Mark and say to him, where is it?
okay,
And
Alright.
it's gonna make it easier.
okay.
If, then, but, so your second point was, can you repeat the second one, which is about costs that may be there in moving?
Right.
Okay. could you
So,
make it-
do you have a list of everything that's going to be new to the public safety building that will come out of the operating budget versus what's funded for the public safety building, like cameras and any technology, like the fiber line? Because I think there's a line item in the fire that maybe will go away if the fiber line comes through, but where is that getting funded out of?
Right, and I think there's going to be some items that maybe police identify separately and fire identify separately because they're two different buildings at this point.
Yeah.
That there may be some
Synergies there.
economies of scale and synergies, better word than mine, that can help moving forward. I don't know that's addressed that first year. I think those are something
Okay.
that probably would show up in the '21 budget. But obviously, there's some, there's gonna be a lot of new systems. And, normally in the purchase price, the first year of maintenance, and everything comes with that. But we need to understand, to your point, what those costs are gonna be moving forward and how that's gonna affect those operating budgets. Again, I'm hoping that any increases in those items are gonna be offset by some of those synergies, by them sharing now the same space.
So do we know if, let's say something were to come up
Sure.
that would have to be included in FY '20, would we not know in time to do a warrant at town meeting and it would come up after the fact, or it could be either way?
If it comes up after February 15th, it's something we're gonna have to handle on the fly. I mean, because that's pretty much where I think we need to have budgets done, warrants set, things ready to go to print, because we're just over a month away at that point from town meeting. So, again, that earlier time, normally I would say by March 15th, or by, first, second week of March, we'd be okay. But we've kind of got to back that up 3 to 4 weeks, with the earlier date, just to make sure that we've got our ducks in a row. So, again, that may remain a little bit fluid. The project is supposed to be done July 1. So, with some of these construction projects, things are going to remain fluid for a bit, I would think, probably into March or April on some of those items.
If it's not material items, you will see at the end of the year, we do transfer funds, where there's some areas where there's some underspend, there's some overspend. So if it's not major items, usually, but can float in there, I'm just saying, so it's difficult for him to do everything there to the T. And
Yeah, it just seems like there's a lot of uncertainty this year, especially with the collapse schedule. So I think, the more we can
No,
get
it's a
ahead
good
of
point.
it,
No, I think, I think we need to make sure we plan for that.
Chelsea, so I can understand your question, is you're concerned that the 9.8% does not appear to incorporate maintenance costs that will be associated with the operation of the new building for this particular fiscal year?
Right.
I thought I asked the chiefs that, and maybe I didn't. If I didn't, I intended to ask them that, whether or not any of their budgets had public safety costs associated with it.
You did.
But we're having a meeting tomorrow night as well. Maybe I can somehow try to quantify what
Okay.
those costs
My
would
suggestion
be.
is to bring it up through the chair. You know, he's a difficult guy, but he's pretty reasonable. And have the OPM put something together.
Yeah.
And
That's a
basically,
good question.
just
It's a
to
great question.
articulate,
I was just expecting to see more
In their
increase.
budgets, in their
I was.
budgets, yeah.
Yeah, but you can't tell line item by line item.
Exactly. Yeah. I can't.
No, I can't, yeah.
and it may be a shifting of expenses too, because where, you know, we may have spent more in heating expenses and utility expenses for older buildings, we're now gonna spend less. But we are gonna have to spend more in other areas, you know, to address some of these new systems. And then again,
Right.
you know, you may not see those expenses the first year. So we just need to understand what we're gonna see and when we're gonna see them, and what's changing and what accommodations can be made within existing funds for that type of thing, and what things we're gonna have to accommodate moving forward.
So if you add the two buildings together, is it more square footage than the new building?
If you add the two buildings together, it's less square footage. So,
To
and again,
combine their-
and it is difficult. You take a look at the police station, it's an old school. 30% of the building is stairways.
Yeah.
You know, and stairwells and everything, big wide stairwells to accommodate lots of people coming up and down at the
So-
same time.
Right.
So again, so the usable space is much different. There's a much better allocation of space. But yes, if you combine the two facilities, the new facility is more
Mark,
square
but just to
footage.
come back to the principal point, is
Sure.
that you are covering in the budget what you people know should be covered this year.
We're covering those things that we're aware of that we know need to be covered. And as you pointed out, there's always things at the end of the year that are unknown. I remember the first year I was here, and someone on advisory asked me how much we were budgeting for snow and ice, because we do know what we're gonna need to spend next year for snow and ice, right? You know, I mean, so, there are unknowns, and we do try to prevent, and protect and insulate the budget against those the best we can.
Want to,
We've increased the reserve fund a
I
little
want to
bit.
say to you, it's the one expenditure
So-
that does not have to stay within the budget.
Right,
It's the
but
one
if you
expenditure
carry-
of
if you-
everything
yeah.
else that we
Yeah,
have in the
but-
budget.
If you carry it over
But
from
to
year to year.
Chelsea's point, these should not be unexpected expenses, these maintenance expenses. They should be known.
We need to understand what the costs are gonna be for that first year of that facility. Correct,
They do.
right,
They say they do.
yeah. Now, you are insulated, obviously. I mean, you know, you do have warranties, you do
I
have,
understand, yeah.
you know, all of these pieces, and most of these new systems carry, you know, a certain level of support with them for at least the first year. So, you know, it gives you a chance to break everything in, to figure everything out, and understand what the costs are gonna be moving forward. So it's gonna be a little bit of a learning curve. We've never,
But,
on the town side, we've never had a new building, so it'll
John,
be,
you
it'll be a
volunteered
learning curve.
to at least make sure that it gets covered from the other side as well. And if there's a
I'll ask the
gap there,
question tomorrow night.
yeah, and if there's a gap there, it can go back to, Marky actually invited that, so
Yeah.
you can still do
I'm
that.
happy to facilitate with the clerk of the works to work that back up to the project manager and director if we
And
need
find out
to.
what the number is.
Yeah, or just to understand what we anticipate those costs to be, never mind the first year of operation, but moving out a couple of years, based on the systems that are gonna be installed in the building. Okay,
Thank you.
all right, thank
I
you.
think we're done. Thank you very much for staying. Public comment? Anybody? Anybody there? You were good listeners. Any public comment? Okay. In that case, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, and me out there too, so.